Becoming Upended, Teaching and Learning About Race and Racism with Young Children and Their Families, from the book Equity and Diversity. And I want to start you out with a statement that was in the book, and it comes from a scenario. But what I found was interesting and important to read was about a woman that had responded to the scenario saying, since this is the beginning of the year, shouldn't the kids be doing things that help them see what they have in common rather than emphasizing their differences? And I want to make sure that we touch on that because I think as we go through our time with children, we often want to say, let's not point out the differences. Let's not make that a big deal. Let's say how we're all, there's this sameness, right? This approach to being all alike. And concern that children should be shielded from learning explicitly about race and racial differences is something that we need to bring to the table and talk about. Adults often worry that introducing these topics too early could be harmful and shape their views early on. Well, I think if we don't talk about these topics, then we are putting out there into the world really that that there is no differences, but there is clearly, and children are no different than anybody else. They recognize differences very early on in life, and I think that needs to be talked about. And sometimes parents think, well, then you're putting that thought into their mind. Now they're going to think about it. Now it's going to be a highlight of them. But I think when we educate children in talking about differences, we can really then educate them on being comfortable around everybody, feeling like, being different is actually a great thing, that it's okay to be different. It's okay that I don't look the same as my friends. And typically with young children, we know that they first start out by looking at the color of our skin and talking about those differences. And so we have an opportunity as educators to be able to plan activities and make sure that we are talking about differences. There's been multiple studies documenting the way that young children take notice of racial differences, and note that as early as preschool, children may begin excluding their peers based on different races and separate them or not include them in their play and other activities. And again, this is something I just mentioned. They do learn very early on about differences. So why are we talking about that? Why are we being intentional in our teaching about it? And families and teachers really do have that obligation. And so we need to make sure that we are talking about these critical issues. And although they are complex, it is something with enough thought and planning that we too can make this something that is part of our curriculum. Learning about race and unlearning racism. So in the Boogie Talks, Beverly Daniel Tatum, which is a former psychology professor and president of Spalding College, has written exclusively about the ways in which the unjust structure of racial hierarchy in American society is normalized and transmitted to children from birth. And she talks about race-based privileges and oppression are internalized. And this sends a powerful message to children. She explains in the same way residents who live in highly populated areas cannot avoid becoming smog breathers, right? It is where they are living that puts them in those conditions. Americans who are immersed in the structures and the practices of white supremacy unwillingly become racism breathers. And many of us may not realize the degree to which these toxic beliefs shape our perceptions and experiences of the world. Unless we have opportunities to unlearn racism, these messages become absorbed and have consequences. basically Beverly's asking us to take a look at ourselves and really understand that, make sure we're not continuing this cycle, that we are not enabling the things that we think we are standing up against. So we need to make sure oppression, in low-income families, it's not always a physical characteristic that we see in them, but their mental health. It could be internal health concerns. Like, there's so many things that affect children from being coming from low income or suppressed based on their race or culture. So there's a powerful metaphor on the top page of 87, and I want you to just take a look at that and then think about that as to just really take it in and see, what do you feel about it? Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? What have you seen before? What are your experiences with that? So I want you to take time to reflect, again, because it does state that we need to be aware of our perceptions and how they shape the experiences of the children we are with. Learning about race and unlearning racism. Early childhood educators can support the unlearning of racism. Teachers intentionally plan curricula. I had said that already about that, but it has to be intentional. It has to be planned. It can't, yes, there's spur of the moment opportunities that we can take with children, but ultimately, in order to do the work that needs to be done, it has to be planned. It has to be intentional in every part of our day, whether it's the way our environment is set up, how we speak with children, the materials we put into it. We need to know. And then understanding terminology. You can read for yourself on there, but it talks about racism, reverse racism, redlining, which I had mentioned in another slide before, but that's a practice by which banks refuse to offer mortgages in predominantly black neighborhoods. How is anybody to succeed if they're not given an opportunity, if they are not allowed to have the same rights, basically rights and opportunities that other people have? And by already, I guess, if you will, suppressing an already suppressed person, that doesn't give them any opportunities to succeed in life, for them to reach their most max potential that they would like to reach. And then colorblindness. And there's going to be a slide coming up on colorblindness in talking about that approach. So in one teacher's work on page 88, it talks about Miss Verwain and how she teaches a kindergarten at a racially and economically diverse public school born in Ghana. She moved to the United States at the age 6 and recalls that when she entered school, she was made to feel like an outsider because of cultural differences. She reported, "When I was in elementary school, I felt like I had to hide my culture so that I could be accepted by the masses. I don't want that to happen within my classroom. I want my kids to be able to recognize who they are." Ms. Verwain is committed to affirming children's racial and cultural identities throughout the year. In her planned curriculum, Ms. Verwain begins by offering learning experiences that allow children to observe and celebrate their unique identities. She also acknowledges need for teachers to reflect on potential questions and concerns in order to prepare as much as possible for unplanned teachable moments. Those are the ones that I had just mentioned. Those are the ones that we get the opportunity on the spot to make a teachable moment. So you have the best intentions, all these plans, the curricula, you've got it all set, but then there's all these everyday moments that you just happen to stumble into that also can be what is called an unplanned teachable moment, and something that can be very powerful. While she knows that some adults may resist addressing topics like identity, race, and racism with young children, she remains committed to the idea that these issues are an essential part of the early childhood curriculum. Mussing about tension, she shared the question she asks herself as she designs curriculum. If I do not talk about race, will it offend anyone? How do you talk about it in a way that doesn't offend people? I think a lot of teachers will just choose not to address it because if you don't address it, you're not offending anyone. I think this is a problem that we are having in our country. We never have had an honest, open discussion about race, ever. I really like what she had to say there, and I want you to think about that. How often do you feel comfortable getting into conversations about race and worrying about offending anyone? I want you to consider the current climate in America, where racism and racially motivated violence are visible to adults and children, and to think about what part you have. She is committed. Are you committed? What are you going to do about ending racism, your role in it? And make sure that as you're working with your children, you are using those teachable moments to really help the next generation. One teacher's work responded to families' anxiety. It's important to discuss families' concerns. Not everybody is going to be comfortable with discussing race and racism, and you need to take each person where they are at on that. And that's reflective in you as well. But we all need to continue to bring that conversation around. And as Ms. Verwain has said, if I do not talk about race, will it offend anyone? How do you talk about it in a way that doesn't offend people? I think a lot of teachers will choose not to address it because if you don't address it, you're not offending anybody. And I think that's where we're at in this world right now, is we're afraid of offending anybody. And I think if we are true to our feelings and know it's coming from a good place, and that we're trying to do good with it, I think we have to stay open-minded, and we have to listen to other people's perspectives and put ours aside. And the more we talk about it, the easier it becomes, the more that it won't seem to be so taboo. And that's where we're at in our culture today. So we need to be talking about this. We shouldn't be in 2021, almost going into 2022, still afraid to offend people about talking about something such as race or racism, as important of a topic as that. The book also talks about two families interviewed about the curriculum and their own perspectives on it. Please make sure you read those. I know that you are required to read the whole entire book, each chapter fully, and review it as needed to take in the information and the content. But make sure you don't miss over these two stories. I think that it'll help deepen your learning. Colorblindness approach was talked about before, and many scholars have questioned the presumed benefits of colorblindness approach, meaning that we're all equal, we're all fair, we all are the same, that sameness again, right? That colorblind approach, that there is no differences and that we really shouldn't be talking about that. As a society, it's not equitable and racial. As a society, not equitable and racial biases does exist. The colorblind approach denies children the validity of their experiences in the world. Because the impact of racial biases is visible, not allowing children to process this injustice is confusing, and it denies them the opportunity to see themselves as agents of change to resist injustice. Colorblindness fails to acknowledge the impact of racism on all people, and further, does not push white people to do the important work of reckoning with the legacy of white supremacy in our lives. Again, I can't say it enough. We can't just go through life approaching it that we've all had the same beginnings. We've all had the same opportunities presented to us in life. We have to really think about the families and the children we serve. And if you've got a colorblind approach, then you're treating them no different than any other family that walks through your door. You need to understand where they're coming from and what they have to offer, their uniqueness, and see them for who they are. We don't want to deny anybody their ability to be seen and their ability to own who they are. And as they talked about the agents of change, we don't want to deny anybody that. So if you're having that colorblindness approach, you really do need to think about what you can do differently so that you are not just painting that broad stroke across to everybody saying, oh yeah, we're all the same, or that, yeah, they might have had a struggle, but they can overcome it. But what is it that's really challenging to them? What is that family needing from you to help them and seeing them for who they really are? So one teacher's work responding to the family's anxiety, going back to that, because I wanted to talk about colorblindness in there so that you can think about it. But not speaking about race with children does not protect them. They live with race and racism every day of their life. So by not talking about it, it's not going away. And it really doesn't make the children feel really good at all, because then you're just ignoring something that is so important to them, something that they are dealing with. And I contribute this to any other thing that's in life. If something is so dear and so important and or something so horrific happening, then if somebody doesn't talk about it, then how does that make that person feel? Not all families will be receptive to the curriculum that addresses racism. So we just set the tone for approaching disagreements respectfully. Have a working dialogue that says that although we may disagree, sometimes a good conversation, or here's the rules to our conversation, or rules of engagement for talking about racism. Because it's never intended to offend anybody. It is, we really just need to have these conversations, and there are going to be disagreements. In our political climate, there's lots of disagreements going on right now. And so I think all of us coming to the table, all of us doing the work, and in later chapter, you're on week 15, it's going to be talking about building a sandbox, a more inclusive sandbox. And you'll get to understand what that means then. But this is an opportunity to add people to your sandbox right now. Yes, we may disagree. And that's probably even good to have somebody that you can disagree with, because then you can learn about a different perspective. You can learn about how they are approaching things. And hopefully they're open-minded enough to hear what you have to say. But not all families are going to be comfortable with this conversation. It is critical that we make ourselves ready for planned and unplanned opportunities to learn about race and racism, whether that is from children in your everyday moments, or if it's a workshop where we have our families coming in, or something in the community that is happening. We need to make sure that we are making ourselves ready and available for that growth. And so one teacher's work following children's lead and planning for learning through children's literature. Children's innate sense of justice and fairness creates opportunities. We can get that. We get that all the time. And we often hear children say, it's unfair. That's not fair. She has too many toys. He has too many toys. She has the one I want, right? This idea of fairness, just, and unfairness stems from a very, very early age. And there is well-written children's literature that allows us to children to identify with and develop empathy for characters, particularly those that may be different from ourselves or themselves. And so making sure that you are reading books to children that talk about that, things about fairness and equal versus fair, and or about different cultures and racism and race. We want to make sure that we are reading that'll help children to identify or see themselves in them, and then learn from the book. Children need to see their lives and interests reflected in books, as I just stated. Library needs to be represented a range of character and experiences. Often our libraries are based on maybe books that teachers really enjoy, but maybe have not been thought well enough about. Does it cover all areas of diversity? Do families see themselves in these books? In a chapter on supporting gay and lesbian families, do you have books in your classroom that support those families? How about cultural books around different families from Middle Eastern geographical area? What are your books having? Do you have it about children with special needs? So really look at your library. Make sure that you are having characters that are non-gender conforming in your books as well. Again, you are going to get pushback from your families. Undoubtedly, you will get pushback from your families at some point in time. But be prepared to have that dialogue and conversation with them so that they understand where you are coming from. So developing the strategies. Teachers need training and time to reflect on and discuss complex issues. As we've been talking about all the time throughout this book, that it's important to this work that we are going through in this class and understanding the families we work with. It does take time. It does take dedication, and it needs to be with a team that you can feel open and honest with. These are complex issues, and they stem from several years and years of turmoil and things that have affected our families. So history is there. So history has to be honored, but also we need to talk about that history and make sure that we can make the future history different for the children and the families we serve. Trusting teachers to write their own script when teachable moments arise. You have to have a trusting team. You have to have trust in yourself. We are going to make mistakes, but you know what? We can learn from them. That's another teachable moment for us. But make sure you are trusting your colleagues that they are doing the best they can. Respond to teachable moments is never a one-size-fits-all. So if a child has a conversation or a question about race or racism, or a family does, remember that same response that you gave to that family or child will not fit the next family, because every question and opportunity is unique in and of itself for that moment. And so we can't do a one-size-fits-all approach. We can't just say, let's end racism. But what is it about racism that we need to work on specifically? Break it down. And think about, the families you serve. Even pedagogical models that do not explicitly address race and racism can be adapted. So don't think that your curriculum, because it doesn't have a component in there that specifically states that, doesn't mean that you don't need to work on this. We all need to work on that. And even some of the smallest changes that we just talked about, like your library, your environment, how you talk to families. Let them know where you stand once you're building that relationship with them. Building a relationship with them is the most important thing. That is where you should be investing your time, is to get to know the families get to know you. And I think from a strong, trusting, caring, and nurturing relationship that you have with them, from there, these conversations, these tough topics can be addressed. So, wrapping up this chapter, this work is challenging and essential. And as we prepare young children to be members of the human family, we must offer them opportunities. Where else are they going to learn about this? If we cover it up, if we don't address it, if we don't talk about it, how are they ever going to learn about any topics, especially about race and racism? Help children see the role they have to play in fostering equity and inclusion through racial justice and critical peace. Is a critical piece. So you want to make sure that they know they can be an agent of change. And when you start talking to them about fairness, be careful of how you say that. There's a difference between fairness and equal. And we want to let the children understand that, yes, things are not fair, things are not equal, but we can work on things together to end and give opportunities to families that otherwise don't have those same opportunities that are afforded to some of our families. So I want you to think about a time that you were upended in your perspective on this issues of race. What aspects of this experience opened you to a different perspective? How did this experience change your approach to teaching?